The afternoon had been loud only an hour ago. Sparrows moved between the fence posts in quick, nervous bursts. A robin pulled at the wet soil beneath your tree. Somewhere above your roofline, starlings argued over a place to land before evening settled in. Your yard felt ordinary, alive in the way it always does when you are not fully paying attention to it. Then the light changed. Not dramatically at first, just enough for the colors around you to lose their warmth. The wind shifted direction, leaves turned their pale undersides toward the sky, and one by one, the birds disappeared. The feeder still swayed gently in the breeze, but nothing landed on it now. The branches that had carried movement all afternoon suddenly looked abandoned. Even the small sounds vanished with surprising speed. No chirping, no fluttering beneath the hedges, no restless scratching in the grass. Only silence. And what makes the moment strange is how complete it feels. Because storms do not slowly empty a yard. Sometimes, within only a few minutes, it is as if every bird knew something before you did. As the first distant thunder rolls somewhere beyond your neighborhood, one question quietly begins to form. Where did they all go? What disappears during a storm is not the birds themselves, only your ability to see them, because the moment your yard falls silent, another world begins moving just out of sight. A hidden system of survival that has been quietly perfected over millions of years. Some birds lower themselves deep inside thorn bushes, so tightly packed that rain can barely pass through. Others press their bodies against tree bark and remain completely motionless for hours. Small flocks vanish beneath roof edges, inside vents, hollow fence posts, abandoned woodpecker cavities, even beneath dense ivy growing only a few feet from your window. And long before the rain actually arrives, many of them already know it is coming. They feel pressure changes in the air, tiny shifts invisible to you, signals their bodies recognize long before the first drop ever touches the ground. Tonight, while you sleep through the sound of rain hitting your roof, thousands of birds around your neighborhood may be sitting silently in places you walk past every single day without noticing. Some will survive storms powerful enough to snap branches from trees. Some will not. And by morning, when the yard suddenly fills with birds again, the strangest part is this. You would never know what happened there during the night. One of the most common storm shelters in an ordinary backyard is also one of the easiest to overlook. Dense shrubs. Not trees swaying high above the ground, but the dark, tangled bushes sitting quietly along fences, beneath windows, or at the corners of a yard where people rarely pay attention. During heavy weather, these low protected spaces become temporary survival chambers. A sparrow understands this with remarkable precision. As wind speeds begin rising, the bird stops feeding earlier than usual. Its movements become shorter, more deliberate. Instead of remaining exposed on open branches, it drops lower through layers of leaves until it reaches the interior of the shrub where the air is calmer and the temperature slightly more stable. Then it waits, sometimes completely still, for hours. The outer branches absorb much of the rain and wind, while the center remains surprisingly protected. Inside, several birds may sit only inches apart without making a sound. Their feathers puff outward to trap heat while their bodies conserve as much energy as possible. And the unsettling part is how close this often happens to you. A storm can move across your neighborhood while birds are hidden less than 10 feet from your back door. You may stand at the window believing the yard has emptied completely, while inside the bushes beneath that same window, tiny living bodies remain awake in total silence. Not gone, only concealed, protected inside spaces your eyes were never trained to notice. For a small bird, a storm is not simply uncomfortable. It can become a direct battle against physics. A sparrow weighs roughly as much as 2 standard pencils. Its body temperature normally stays around 105 degrees Fahrenheit, far hotter than a human body. Maintaining that heat during cold rain and violent wind requires enormous energy for such a tiny animal. And storms remove heat fast. Water flattens feathers that normally trap insulating pockets of air close to the skin. Strong wind strips away body warmth even faster, forcing birds into a dangerous state where they can lose critical energy within only a few hours. So their bodies begin changing behavior almost immediately. Heart rate slow, movement becomes minimal. Many birds tuck one leg upward beneath their feathers to reduce heat loss. Some rotate their bodies away from the wind direction with almost mechanical precision, exposing the smallest possible surface area to the storm. Even their feathers transform into survival equipment. Special muscles beneath the skin lift the feathers outward, creating thicker layers of trapped warm air around the body. It is a simple adaptation, but without it, many small birds would not survive a single cold night of heavy rain. And still, the danger remains constant. A prolonged storm during colder seasons can kill thousands of birds through exhaustion and hypothermia alone, not because predators found them, not because food disappeared, but because tiny bodies burn energy faster than the storm allows them to replace it. For creatures this small, survival is often measured hour by hour. During the day, most backyard birds behave as if space belongs to them alone. They chase each other from feeders, fight over branches, scatter at the slightest intrusion. A sparrow that lands too close may be forced away within seconds. A robin may defend a patch of grass with surprising aggression for an animal so small. Their world, in daylight, is built around territory, but storms quietly change those rules. As darkness and rain close over a neighborhood, survival begins to matter more than distance. Inside dense evergreens, hollow tree cavities, and sheltered corners beneath roofs, birds that spent the entire day competing may suddenly gather together in silence. Not as families, not even as permanent groups, just temporary alliances formed against cold and exposure. Sometimes dozens of small birds pack themselves into a single protected space no larger than a backpack. Each body becomes part of a shared heat source. Feathers press together, tiny claws tighten against wet branches while heavy rain moves above them through the leaves. In strong wind, entire groups may sway together as if connected to the same invisible rhythm, and almost no sound comes from them. The stillness is what feels unnatural, because outside the storm, these same birds are restless and noisy. Yet hidden inside the dark center of a tree, they become quiet enough to disappear completely from the world around them. Not because they trust each other, but because a group loses heat more slowly than a single bird alone in the rain. For one night, survival temporarily overrides instinct. What makes this even stranger is that most birds are not fully asleep during a storm. Not in the way humans sleep. Many species exist in a state that researchers sometimes compare to partial vigilance. Their bodies rest, but parts of the brain remain alert enough to react almost instantly to danger. It is one reason birds can explode from a tree in complete darkness only seconds after detecting movement nearby. Even at night, their awareness never fully disappears. Inside a storm shelter, a bird may appear motionless for hours while its senses continue monitoring the environment around it. The pressure of nearby bodies, vibrations moving through branches, sudden changes in wind direction, unfamiliar sounds beneath the rain, a snapping twig, the low scrape of claws against bark, the wing beat of an owl passing somewhere overhead. For small birds hidden in darkness, survival depends on detecting threats before they come close enough to strike. And storms make this far more difficult. Rain masks sound, wind distorts movement. Entire trees sway continuously, forcing the brain to separate normal motion from potential danger. So even while resting, the nervous system remains tense. You can sometimes hear evidence of this yourself during heavy rain, a sudden burst of wings from a shrub at midnight, brief alarm calls swallowed quickly by thunder, invisible movement inside the darkness surrounding your home, because the yard is not sleeping as deeply as it seems. All through the night, countless tiny minds remain half awake, listening through the storm. A storm changes the way you see your yard. Normally, movement is what convinces you something is alive. Birds hopping across the grass, wings crossing the sky, sudden noise from the trees above you. When those things disappear, the space feels empty almost immediately. But emptiness is often only the limit of human perception, because during heavy rain, your yard may contain more hidden life than it does on an ordinary afternoon. Birds tucked deep inside shrubs, small flocks pressed silently beneath gutters, tiny bodies balanced inside dark tree cavities only a few feet above your head, all of them awake enough to survive. And once you begin noticing this, storms stop feeling quiet in the same way. The darkness outside your window becomes layered with invisible awareness. Every hedge becomes a possible shelter. Every dense branch may be holding living creatures waiting for dawn in complete silence. What feels abandoned is actually occupied, not by absence, but by concealment. The yard does not empty before a storm. It closes itself. Some of the strangest bird behavior during storms happens long after darkness settles in. Birds you normally think of as active only, during the day, suddenly begin moving through the night in ways most people never witness. Robins may leave exposed trees entirely and relocate multiple times before a storm reaches its strongest point. Sparrows sometimes abandon familiar roosts if wind direction changes unexpectedly. Even pigeons, which appear calm and predictable in daylight, can become highly restless during severe weather, pacing beneath bridges and roof structures hours before heavy rain arrives. And then there are the moments storms confuse the natural rhythm of night itself. Artificial lights reflecting through rain and low clouds can disorient birds flying overhead. Some species mistake illuminated streets or buildings for safer pathways through the storm. Others circle repeatedly through neighborhoods in complete darkness, navigating using brief gaps in lightning flashes and instinctive memory of the landscape below. People occasionally wake during storms to sounds they cannot explain. Rapid wing beats against windows, soft impacts on walls or rooftops, sudden calls echoing through rain at 2 in the morning. Most assume it is simply the weather, but sometimes those sounds come from exhausted birds still searching for shelter while the storm moves above them. And perhaps the strangest part is this. Many of these birds return to normal behavior by sunrise so completely that the entire night disappears without evidence. By morning, the same robin may stand calmly on your lawn, pulling worms from wet grass as if nothing unusual ever happened, as if the storm erased its own hidden world before daylight arrived. What happens in your yard during a storm is not an isolated event. It is part of something unimaginably larger. At any given moment, there may be billions of birds moving through weather systems across the planet, entire migratory populations crossing continents while storms form beneath them. Small songbirds weighing less than an ounce navigating pressure changes, powerful enough to reshape oceans and forests. And many of them are passing directly over human neighborhoods, above cities, above highways, above quiet suburban streets glowing faintly through rain. Weather radar has revealed something astonishing over the last several decades. During migration seasons, enormous clouds appearing on radar screens were once mistaken for storms themselves. But they were not rain. They were birds. In some regions, millions can move through the sky in a single night. And when dangerous weather approaches, entire populations begin adjusting simultaneously. Birds descend lower, search for emergency shelter, delay migration routes, gather inside forests, marshes, abandoned structures, backyard trees, and dense vegetation scattered across ordinary neighborhoods like yours, which means a single storm moving through your town may force thousands of hidden survival decisions within only a few square miles. Tiny hearts beating rapidly inside gutters, flocks packed silently into trees lining your street, exhausted migrants holding onto branches through freezing rain while traffic passes beneath them completely unaware. Most humans experience storms from inside protected buildings, behind walls, windows, heated rooms. But outside, countless fragile creatures are enduring the same storm directly against their bodies. And somehow, by morning, many survive. Not because storms spare them, but because over millions of years, birds evolved an invisible system of timing, shelter, cooperation, and awareness so effective that most people never realize it exists at all, even while standing in the middle of it. The next time a storm moves toward your neighborhood, you may notice the silence differently, not as absence, but as preparation. The empty feeder, the motionless branches, the sudden disappearance of birds that filled the yard only minutes earlier. None of it means the life around you has vanished. In many cases, it means that life has moved into hiding with extraordinary precision. Somewhere beneath leaves darkened by rain, small bodies are waiting without movement. Inside trees and shrubs you pass every day, fragile creatures are surviving a world that becomes dangerous far faster for them than it ever does for you. And by morning, most of them will quietly return. A sparrow on the fence, a robin crossing wet grass, the familiar sounds beginning again as if the storm carried no hidden story at all. But now, once you have seen the pattern, the yard cannot feel entirely ordinary anymore. Because storms reveal something people rarely think about. Not just how birds survive, but how much invisible life exists around you at all times without asking to be noticed. Your yard was never empty. You simply learned how to look at it differently. So the next time rain begins tapping against your window and the birds suddenly disappear, pause for a moment and listen carefully to the silence outside. You may never hear it the same way again.